Well, once again, happy to have you. Here we're going through the book of Revelation. We're going to go now to Revelation 13:11. Revelation 13:11. But let's read first verse 10. And I read, "He that leadeth into captivity," that's the papacy, "shall go into captivity." I continue to read, "He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword." Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. So here we see the deadly one. We see when Berthier went to the Vatican, took the Pope by force using the sword, and took him into captivity. That's the end of the papacy. That's the deadly wound in 1798. With that in mind, now let's read verse 11. "And I," this is John, once again, "beheld another beast." So now John is looking, and then he sees another power. Beast means power. And this beast is coming up out of the earth, not the sea. This one is coming out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. So here is looking to another beast, and he sees that this one is coming out of the earth. In Daniel 7, 4 beasts, they come out of the sea, out of the waters. Revelation 13, the first beast, comes also out of the water. However, this is the only beast in Bible prophecy that comes out of the earth. Waters means people, nations, multitude. So the empires, the kingdoms that came out of the water came out of places where you had a lot of people. There was a civilization going on already. But this new power that is coming up and out of the earth is coming out of a place where there are very few people. Very few people. There's no civilization, no kingdom, no government there. So he's talking about the United States of America. I'm going to see that in a moment. And then when he sees this country coming into existence, he sees that it looks like a lamb, and it has two horns. They are not together. Civil power, religious power. They are not together. They are separated. And it has two horns, and the horns that it had is like a lamb. So he is looking at the birth, at the beginning of this country. It was just a little lamb. Innocent, beautiful. But let's not forget that the lamb represents Christ. John 1:29 says, "Behold, the Lamb of God that takes away the sin of the world." So he's talking about Jesus. So this nation at his beginning looks, well, it's not looking like that, but it looked like Jesus. It has two horns. For the first time in human history, the civil power and the religious power were not together. They were separated. That was unique. That's the first time that happened in human history. If you see all the empires of the world, from Babylon to the papacy, every one of them was a combination of civil power and religious power. And every one of them became a persecuting power against the people of God, against the faithful people of God. Now there's a new power, and this power has civil power because we have to have a government. But the government is not supposed to be controlled and manipulated and used by the church. And the church, also, we need to have a church, but the church is not to be controlled and manipulated by the state. There are different institutions, and they should continue to be separate. They should never unite. When they do that, then they become a persecuting power. As long as they are not united and they respect each other and they complement each other, the country will prosper and will do well. So we see that the United States was coming out of the earth. And let me read to you from the book, The Great Controversy, a statement that will help us see even more what I'm trying to share with you. It says, "But the beast with lamp-like horns was seen coming up out of the earth. Instead of overthrowing other powers to establish itself, the nation thus represented must arise in territory previously unoccupied and grow up gradually and peacefully. It could not then arise among the crowded and struggling nationalities of the old world. The turbulent seas of peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues, it must sought in the western continent." Page 441. "And he had 2 horns like a lamp. The lamp-like horns indicate youth, innocence, gentleness, fitly representing the character of the United States when presented to the prophet as coming up in 1798. Among the Christian exiles who first fled to America and sought an asylum from royal oppression and priestly intolerance were many who determined to establish a government upon the broad foundation of civil and religious liberty." So here we see this country coming up out of the earth. It's interesting because we read in verse 10 that the French government was the one that afflicted the deadly wound to the papacy. And it's interesting also that the French government in 1798, just a few months after the deadly wound, was the first nation on earth that acknowledged the United States of America as an independent nation. Interesting. Once again, we see the beauty of the Word of God. We see the nation coming up, being formed. It was a lamp. It's a little lamp. And then the prophet said that a transformation was going to take place, to the point that at the end, that same nation that was Christ-like at his beginning will be speaking, will be legislating, telling the people what to do and how to worship, as a dragon, as Satan himself. So it's going to be a huge transformation from a lamp to the dragon. And then the rest of the chapter is going to tell us how that is going to happen. Imagine when this nation came up, it defeated the British Empire. Just a few people, not a lot of people. About 4 million people were in the United States then. About 50% were colonists. That means they wanted independence. You have a third that were loyal to the Crown of England. And then you have a smaller group, perhaps like 15%, that were not decided which way to go. So out of the 50% that were colonists and they wanted independence, only 3% of the men decided to gain independence by having an independence word. And they were able, that's not the power of humans, they were able to defeat the British Empire. A much powerful entity, better army, better weapons, more training than any other army in the world, and they were able, by the grace of God, to defeat the British Empire. Not just once, twice, because 35 years later, 1812, there was another war with Britain. Once again, they were able to defeat the British Empire. So you see the hand of God fulfilling prophecy and blessing the people that were willing to come to worship Him according to the Word of God. Protestant, that means sola scriptura people. And then to establish a government where the civil government was going to be on one hand and the religious government or power was going to be on the other hand. Let me read to you another statement from the Great Controversy. It says, the greatest and most favored nation upon the earth is the United States. So this nation was, and he has been greater than Babylon. Even though it was the golden empire, this nation has been the greatest and also the most favored nation upon the earth. Imagine that. A gracious providence has shielded this country and poured upon her the choicest of heaven's blessings. So this country has been protected by the grace of God. And not only has been protected, His choicest blessings has been poured upon this nation. When this nation was established, it was a small nation at the beginning, 13 colonies. But then, after independence, after they established a constitution that acknowledged that the separation of church and state is a necessity. And that constitution was ratified in 1787. So the Declaration of Independence took place in 1776, and then the Constitution took place in 1787. But even though it was a constitution that acknowledges that the separation of church and state is a necessity, it was not enough. You know, the founding fathers and many others says, even though it's a wonderful constitution, it's not good enough. We need to add to it the Bill of Rights, 10 amendments more, to make sure that the rights of the people are protected and guaranteed. So then in 1791, the Bill of Rights was ratified and added to the Constitution. So a wonderful piece of legislation. And there for sure, you have the First Amendment. Complete freedom of religion. The government is not going to establish any religion, period. On the other hand, the government is not going to prohibit the free exercise of that religion. That meant that there was not going to be a pope in America. That also meant that there was not going to be a king in America. The founding fathers, they saw over there in Europe, and they could see what the royal family, combined with the clergy, the papacy, have done for the European people. They have been taking advantage of the people. The armies have been serving the king and the pope. The army have been oppressing the people, have been conquering of the nation, have been making wars. So when they established this nation, they said, no army. That's why in the Bill of Rights, you have the Second Amendment. The right of the people to bear arms. Because that people was going to be the army of the nation. There was not going to be an army as it has it right now, a very powerful, a large army. That's not in the Constitution. That's unconstitutional. But it's too late, because it's not going to change. So what they had in mind is this: if anyone comes and attacks the United States, the people themselves, out of their free will, the government is not going to pay a penny. The people themselves are going to protect themselves and their family, and in the process, they're going to be protecting the country. So we have a free army, and we don't have to pay for it. We don't have to train the army. We don't buy even the weapons for them. They're going to buy themselves their own guns, not to kill. It's going to be for self-defense. Sorry to say, but eventually that mindset changed. And today, this country has a very big and powerful army, but it's not in this constitution. And by the way, it's costing the country a lot of money. And it has been costing a lot of money. See, the founding fathers would have said no to an army. You know why? Because they saw what the armies did over in Europe. The army were used to kill the people, to oppress the people, to control the people. The army has been used to invade other countries and to conquer other countries. And they said, we do not want an army because we're not going to conquer any other country. We're not going to invade any other country. The people themselves, they will defend themselves, and in the process, they're going to defend the nation. Once the invader has been defeated and pushed back, the people will go back to their homes and they will continue living, and there will not be an army for this nation. That's why people have no idea about the Second Amendment. Because the purpose of it was not to have an army. The people themselves were going to defend themselves and also defend the nations free of charge. Imagine, what a deal. Free of charge, and it's not going to be an invading force at all. Then we see that in 1803, the nation increased by 50% when it purchased Louisiana from the French. See, Napoleon at that time was running out of money. Actually, he was out of money. And because he was out of money, he sought a piece of land all over there in the Americas. Well, we don't need it. It's too far, and there's nobody there, and there's not much in it. So let's sell it to the United States because we need the money. And then Jefferson, he was the president at that time, bought Louisiana. I mean, when he made the purchase, some people were questioning him, oh, what have you done? $15 million, that's a lot of money. Actually, it's very little money. It's less than 3 pennies an acre. Imagine, it was a bargain. Even then, it was a bargain. And the country increased by 50% from one day to the next. See, God was already blessing this nation. Then, in 1819, they bought Florida from Spain, $5 million. And then you have Texas. Texas gained his independence from Mexico in 1836. And then in 1846, 10 years later, they decided to annex to the United States free land. Not a penny, they paid for it. Not a penny. And a big piece of land too. And then you had the Mexican-American War from 1846 to 1848, 2 years. So in 1895, Texas joined the United States, and then after the war with Mexico, 7 states joined also with the United States. Eventually, the United States compensated Mexico with $15 million. Once again, it was a bargain. On the other hand, as the country was growing, Satan was already working to try to undo what God was doing for the United States. When this nation was established, what was the name of the place? It was New England. When the Spaniards came over and they established themselves here in the Americas, what was the name that was given to the territory? New Spain. Eventually became Mexico, by the way. So you have New England, Protestant, New Spain, Catholic. But even some of that territory was eventually given to the United States. Another portion of that territory became Central America. So what is Mexico today is only 1/3 of what it used to be then. What it used to be then. Then, in 1867, they bought from Russia Alaska. It's another piece of land, a lot of land, for $7.2 million. I mean, less than 2 pennies an acre. So we see how God was already blessing this nation, was adding land to it more and more to make it big and powerful and prosperous. Then they bought a piece of land from Mexico, which is part of New Mexico today, and perhaps Arizona as well. Then during the Spanish-American War in 1898, they gained what is the Philippines, Guam, and Puerto Rico. Eventually, the Philippines gained independence and became independent. Also, Cuba gained his independence during that time. And by the way, it was part of the United States for about 5 years, but eventually Cuba, like the Philippines, became an independent country. But Puerto Rico and Guam and some of all the islands in the Pacific, even now, they still belong to the United States. So the country was growing by leaps and bounds, and God was blessing it. Why? Because it was a place for freedom from persecution and oppression around the world. How do we know that? Let's go to Revelation 12. Revelation 12. Verse 15, and the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman. So the serpent means Satan. And then he's casting out of his mouth water as a flood. That's a lot of water. And the purpose was to destroy the woman, the true church, that he might cause her to be carried away off the flood. So the purpose for the persecution was to destroy the people of God. Verse 16, and the earth, the United States, helped the woman. And the earth opened her mouth, her boundaries, her frontiers, and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. So even in Revelation 12, you see that God was already foretold the time when the United States was going to be a place where there was going to be a lot of land, and he was going to open his mouth. So the oppressed and the persecuted was going to be able to come and find a place of freedom, a land of freedom where they could worship God and they could do ministry without interference from the state or interference from the church. That was a unique idea. That was really a unique idea. So you see that the lamp-like power, as you notice, it was a lamp. It was not a furious, vicious animal that was destroying and killing like the lion and the bear and the leopard and the dreadful beast. No, it was a loving, tender beast at the beginning. However, the time will come when that loving and tender beast was going to become then a dragon. As you know, the dragon represents Satan's. And dragons, they killed, they persecute, they destroy freedom, they destroy nations, they invade, they conquer, they mandate, they order people what to do and not to do. Thus is going to be the end of this nation. Because Bible prophecy says, and we're going to continue reading and learning of it, that the time will come where there's going to be a transformation from lamb-like to be a dragon beast. And we already see that happening even today as we speak. So we can see that God in His mercy was protecting and blessing this nation. And I want to read to you another statement before I finish. And this is what it says. It says, freedom of religious faith was also granted, every man being permitted to worship God according to the dictates of his conscience. Republicanism and Protestantism became the fundamental principles of the nation. These principles are the secret of his power and prosperity. So what made this nation great? It wasn't the big size of piece of land. It wasn't that the people were coming from Europe. It was that there were two principles: a republican way of government and also a Protestant faith. Those two principles we just read made this nation prosperous, mighty, and great. By the way, that's why our countries in Latin America have never prospered. They never embraced the Reformation, and they have never had a republican way of government. There has been union on church and state from the very beginning, even today. And that's why we see the chaos and the poverty and the misery and the wars that we see in a lot of countries, not just in Latin America, in Africa and Asia as well, because those two principles have been missing. When those two principles are exercised, any nation of any people, a Bible-based religion, that's Protestant faith, and a republican way of life will bring once again prosperity to the nation. May God bless us, and thank you once again for joining us to study the book of Revelation.